Okay, so I think we should start now. And so hello everyone again, and welcome to today's event. And I would like to introduce myself and my fellow moderator. So my name is Erikas. I'm from Generation Climate Europe, and my colleague is Alba. And we are from Generation Climate Europe, which is the largest coalition of youth-led networks on the European level advocating for climate action. And together with our co-organizers, RUs, EURIC, and SME United, we're thrilled to host you this event on the critical revision of the Waste Framework Directive, with a specific focus on enhancing textiles extended producer responsibility, the EPR, schemes through inclusive governance. So we have an excellent lineup of panelists who bring expertise from diverse sectors involved in the waste framework and circular economy practices. They will be sharing insights into the challenges and opportunities for creating more inclusive and effective EPR schemes for textiles, which is a sector with significant environmental impact. So I will just shortly introduce who our panelists are and where they come from. We have Janine Rolling, director and founder of Collectif Circular Textile, Mariska Boyer, president of EURIC Textiles, RRU's Matthias Nitsch, he's the president of the organization, then Andreas Brigger, climate and energy environment policy director at SME United, and Vania Veras from Municipal Waste Europe. And the opening remarks will be given by MEP Rasmus Nordqvist, Greens shadow reporters for WFD. So the quick overview of, before I give the opening remarks to Rasmus, we'll begin with the opening remarks around the context of EPR schemes and textiles. This will be followed by our panel discussion, where each panelist will offer a unique perspective on the topic and will be asked questions by me or Alba. And finally, we'll open the floor to Q&A, providing an opportunity for all of you to engage with our experts. So don't forget, if you have a question, to write it down, and if that's not going to be answered in the meantime. So thank you all for joining, and I wish you a great event. And I will give the floor to Rasmus now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this important talk. I see it as much as also good people coming together to find the good answers and solutions. I will just begin by introducing myself, because why am I at all jumped on this file in the parliament when I got elected? My background is the fashion industry. I was trained fashion designer back in the 90s, if any remember those times, and worked in the industry for 20 years before I joined politics. And the reason why I ran for election in Denmark first was actually my work in fashion was a bit depressing. It was depressing to look at something that I love, the fashion industry, our dressing, our way of communicating through our clothes, and see that it was basically destroying the planet we walk on. And trying to create changes within the business didn't really succeed. We talked about sustainability in fashion over and over and over again, and nothing really happened. So I said, to myself, well, then we have to make regulation and legislation in order to do any change. So I joined the Danish Parliament, worked there also on these topics, and clearly could see, okay, if I really want an impact, it's off to the European Parliament. So now I will try my luck here to change the fashion industry. So we also in 10 and 20 years can say what a fantastic business, how great it is, but not without the changes we're going to talk about today. As you all know, the position of the Parliament and Council was decided actually before the election. Since the election, we just reaffirmed from the Parliament side that the position and report we had on the file was good, and we're going to continue on that. So the state of play right now is basically that the trilogues had started. We have had a single political level meeting, and now there is technical meetings on the matter. for me, what has been important is actually to stand up for the position from the Parliament side, because I actually was quite pleased sitting in the Danish Parliament looking to what the European Parliament were doing at that point, because it was ambitious, it was pushing already okay proposition from the Commission in a very good direction. There is, of course, things that really need to be carried through in this trilogue and in this negotiations we have now. And first of all, it is how do we actually look at the EPR? I mean, when you look at for example, some of the other EPRs we know, it's basically done on purely on the weight or the total of what we're looking at. But when we talk about textile, we need to be more details. We need to have an EPR which is based both on the weight and the quantity, because in order to actually do something about fast fashion and what it's doing to our planet, we need to look at both and really have a comprehensive approach to it. Second of all, I think also to have the scope enlarged to be bigger, so it's also carpets and mattress and all the other things that's part of the textile industry, because we know it actually also is a huge area when it comes to resources. And then there is the last question, which I know that has been discussed, and also I talked to some of you, I can see from the names in the list here, and with other organizational businesses, and that is, when do we start this? Because when you look at the directive proposition from the Commission, it was like 30 months after. Clearly, if we want to live up to our own strategy on sustainable fashion and textile and do something about fast fashion before 2030, well, we need to be much faster. And that's why the Parliament put forward this proposition of it being operational in the member states 18 months after the decision. And I think that's really important that we start really early. Also because this whole question about why do we do all this to make an actual circular textile business, we need to begin to have the resources in order to do that. Because right now, it's like, what do come first? Do we create the business models we need, or do we actually get in the materials we need in order to fix a business? And I think the scary part right now is that across Europe, we see great new businesses starting up actually in order to sort textile waste, to reuse, to respin and reweave fabric based on this. And basically, they're going out of business before we even started because we are so slow from political side. So I really think that my opening remark to this discussion is, how can we be much faster with what we're looking at? Because if we want to really do something now, we need to move yesterday. We need to move both for the planet, for the sake of where we see production being made now, but we also need it for the business side, because if we want sustainable business model in the fashion and textile industry in the future, we need to move very fast, and we need to have the materials in order to do this. And then comes the next step after this, and I know it's a very precise title of discussion you have invited for, but I cannot not say what I hope will be next steps as well, and that is, of course, that we use public procurement in order to grow the business of reused textiles, that we go through our legislation when we have it here in the Parliament and Commission and Council to really push for this business model of circular textile use. I think that should be my quick opening remark, and I look very much forward to having this discussion and to hear from all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us the Parliament perspective. And now we'll move to Florian Marin, a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, who will give us a bit of an overview of the directive itself. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for also for joining us today as we explore on one of the most pressing issues of our time, I'm daring to say, the transition to a circular economy. My name is Florian Marin, and I'm a representative of the European Economic and Social Committee. Well, the European Economic and Social Committee, for those who are not familiar with this institution, is a consultative body of the EU that represents the voice of the organized civil society. Basically, we are structured in three main groups. The group one is represented by employers, group two by workers, and group three by NGOs. So the European Economic and Social Committee is directly contributing to strengthening democracy, support sustainability, but also building social progress, and in the same time acting as a bridge between institutions and citizens, also for foster greater understanding of the EU policies. Myself, I'm deeply involved in the textile industry, being also a trade unionist. Actually, I'm vice president of the group 2, and from this position, I am representing workers from the textile industry. Topics such as sustainability, circularity, workers' rights, but also fairness of the industry are part of the collective bargaining process and also part of my daily activity. So basically, I'm doing it daily. I'm confronting with these topics. The transition to a circular economy can only be implemented with the active engagement of the civil society alongside with businesses, workers, but also consumers. This is why the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform was created. Actually, it was established in 2017 by the Commission and the European Economic and Social Committee. And right now, the platform is a network of networks. It's going beyond sectorial activities and is highlighting cross-sectorial opportunities, but also challenges. The platforms also serve as a model for linking policies and practice in the field of circular economy. It is a knowledge gathering hub, a place for dialogue and a synergy instrument between existing initiatives, contributing to disseminating the concept of circular economy at national, regional, but also local level. And at the same time, by making information more easily accessible and by providing a framework for exchange, but also discussion. The EU Waste Framework Directive has long served as a cornerstone of the EU waste legislation, and in its evolution reflects Europe's commitment to creating a more sustainable and circular economy. The recent update of the Waste Framework Directive aimed to significantly strengthen Europe's approach to waste reduction, recycling, but also sustainable resource management. By addressing these critical areas, the revised directives underscore the importance of aligning waste management practice with sustainable goals. Actually, it is motivating us to move beyond traditional methods and embrace innovative strategies to minimize waste and maximize resource efficiency. As you already know, and this is why we are here, actually, the textile industry is a significant contributor to the environmental degradation. By incorporating measures such as extended producer responsibility, named by the acronym EPR schemes, the Waste Framework Directive revision ensures that the producers are accountable for the entire life cycle of their product, fostering a culture of repair, reuse, but also recycling. EPR schemes have emerged as a powerful tool in our effort to manage waste in a way in which is inclusive, it is sustainable. However, their success depends on one of the most fundamental principles, inclusivity. Inclusive governance of the EPR schemes means bringing together diverse stakeholders at early stage, and we are referring here at planning, implementation, but also operation. This includes local government, waste management entities, environmental organizations, industry representatives, but also civil society. Each group plays a unique and an essential role in the life cycle of the waste and its management. By integrating their perspective, we ensure that EPR schemes are robust, equitable, but also effective. Inclusive governance, and it is crucially important that it's not just a strategy, it's a necessity. Together we can create a systems that are fair, efficient, and aligned with the goals of a sustainable future. In 2023, the European Economic and Social Committee issued a detailed opinion on the Waste Framework Directive revision. We are recognizing that the need for an inclusive stakeholder consultation, advocating for the platform like European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform to facilitate dialogue and alignment is crucial. Those consultations are also crucial for ensuring that the policies address real-world challenges, but also opportunities. In our opinion, we are proposing the mandatory introduction of an extended responsibility scheme for textile products. While acknowledging the importance of supporting micro-enterprises, SMEs as well, the European Economic and Social Committee urged for re-evaluation of their treatment under the polluter pays principle. The principle must remain a cornerstone of the waste management, ensuring that all actors, regardless of size or shared responsibility for the environmental impacts, are accountable. The European Economic and Social Committee highlights the importance of reviewing the legislation to guarantee a practical, on-the-ground implementation. Policies must not only be ambitious, but also feasible, with clear guidelines and clear tools to support compliance at all levels. The opinion stressed the need for a single set of rules to apply uniformly to all producers and distributors in the sector, but also especially to online platforms. This harmonization is essential to create a level playing field to ensure consistency in the waste management practices across Europe. Our committee called for further efforts to streamline the application of the polluter pays principle, making it fair, transparent, but also impactful across sectors. I will finish by calling for stakeholders and their essential role in the governments and their engagement through platforms like European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform that will contribute to a holistic approach to ensure that the management systems are equitable, effective, and accountable to all stakeholders. As we discuss these critical topics today, let us remember that no single entity can achieve a circular economy alone. It is requiring collective actions and commitment. Platforms like European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform are a real proof of how diverse stakeholders can come together and can create equitable, effective, and accountable waste management systems. The transition towards circular economy is not just an environmental imperative, but also an opportunity for innovation, collaboration, and shared responsibility. I urge you to engage actively in today's discussion, to contribute with your insight and commit to play your part in this vital transformation. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am also at your disposal for future questions if it is the case. Thank you so much once again.
Great. Thank you so much, Florian. That was incredibly informative. Now we'll move on to a few questions and answers with the panel. So these are questions that we've kind of pre-decided, and then from that, as Erica said, we'll move on to kind of an open Q&A with the audience. So first of all, I'd like to move to Matthias. And I'm just wondering if maybe you can give us an overview of why it's so crucial to ensure that social enterprises participation is a key part of the future of the textile EPR schemes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I'm speaking here for the Reuse Network, which is a network of European social enterprises, and most of them are also dealing with textile collection and textile reuse in most European countries. Yeah, why social enterprises should be at the, I would say, at the core of future systems is simply because the social economy invented the textile collection to support social activity, their own social activities, long before this was an issue of waste policy or resources. And to illustrate that, I will give you a kind of fun fact. I think that no one in the audience will probably estimate when the first textile collection that was ever reported in history took place. It was more than 1,550 years ago. And it was in my home country, in Austria, which at that time was not yet existing as Austria. It was part of the Roman Empire. And as such, it was this first textile collection took part during the late antique period of the collapsing Roman Empire to support the population of border towns near the river Danube in today's Austria that were suffering from constant raids of barbarians from the north. And this textile collection was organized by a Christian priest. His name is Severin, and later he was made a saint. So he is known as Saint Severin, and he organized this textile collection in the south of Austria, which was relatively peaceful at that time. and the textiles were transported over the Alps during the winter time to the north, to the river Danube, where the people suffered, where the people needed these textiles. And so that is more than 1,550 years ago. So we really have a long history of social and charity textile collection. And this is one of the reasons why I think that social economy still today should play a leading role in textile collection. Because we as social enterprises are creating the maximum value out of textiles, because the maximum value is to reuse a textile and to reuse it locally. Just to give you a small example, in Austria, 60% of the total revenue of a textile collection of social enterprises comes from only 10% of the mix which is sold in Austria. And the second then comes reuse abroad, which is also a huge part, but a much smaller part of the revenues. And then comes all the rest, recycling and some parts of the collection which cannot even be recycled. And these produce costs, higher costs than revenues for the recycling, and only costs and no revenues for the non-reusable, non-recyclable part. And this means that local reuse finances the biggest proportion of the current collection and sorting costs. And reuse abroad is usually also economically more or less self-sustaining, but currently under a huge crisis because of multiple global market irritations. And so, but recycling always has been economically insufficient. And this is why, after all, EPR was created, because there are huge amounts of textiles which cannot be reused. So these have to be recycled instead of incinerated. And that has to be paid by someone, because recycling doesn't pay itself. And so after all, the producers should pay this gap. The social economy is focusing on creating the value, whereas the recycling has to be done, but it doesn't yet so far create value, at least not that much as reuse does. And so the recycling industry is doing a fantastic job, but it's not yet here in the extent that we would need it. So we need investments, we need financing from the producers to establish recycling, but we have to be careful that recycling will not in the future kill reuse, because of the simply mass flow. And this is why I think that it is absolutely crucial to ensure that social enterprises are at the core of the future. Whatever systems are created or invented, social enterprises with their focus on local reuse should be at the center of that.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to jump on what you said and ask you a second question then, which is, how can inclusive governance foster this social enterprise involvement?
Well, I think, how it can be done, that depends from country to country and from the legal framework in every member state that will be created after the Waste Framework Directive is in place. So I think it can be in many ways that this can be fostered. One way can be the governing bodies of PROs, of the producer responsibility organizations that are more or less carrying the tasks of the EPR role. And so within these governance bodies, there should not only be the producers, because we have this principle, polluter pays or producer pays, but it does not automatically mean that the producers automatically are the only ones that make the rules. So after all, they pay for something that is actually not their core business. Their core business is to produce. and their core business is not to recycle. So they pay for something that they actually would not do voluntarily if they would not have to. And so it is very crucial that that these governing bodies of these PRO or EPR schemes are formed by also other than producers, other bodies like public, the public administration, politics, and the social enterprises, which, as I pointed out, are actually those who invented the textile collection in the first place. So it should be civil society, NGOs, social economy, and the public sector having a say in what happens with the money that the polluters or producers pay to take over their responsibility for the material that they are flooding over our planet.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthias. Really interesting intervention. I'm now going to move on to Viana and maybe touching kind of on what Matthias you kind of ended with, but looking at the municipality level. Viana, how do you see the future of responsibility of municipalities in kind of the separate collection of textiles and their also collaboration with these EPR schemes as well? Do we have a representative from Municipal Waste Europe on the panel?
We do. Maybe can you move on to another one and leave Vanya for the end? She's here,
yes,
but
of course.
Some issues. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, Mariska, you're up. Let's look, I think, which could be interesting, is at a particular context. So looking at the Dutch EPR scheme, wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about how that was established and also then how it was negotiated.
Yeah, I'd love to, but it's, as a matter of fact, not existing yet at this point in time. So it's kind of a short answer. Just to give a little bit of background about myself, because I think in the beginning, in the opening, it was said I was doing EURIC. So I'm also very much involved in the Dutch Recycling Association for Textiles. I'm president of that, as well as EURIC Textiles, which is the textiles branch of EURIC. Yeah, as we speak, we do not have an EPR system in the Netherlands yet. I'm, through the association, very much involved in all the discussions and all the negotiations that are happening. We do have a law. We have a law that was implemented for EPR on the 1st of July in 2023. We also have targets, and the targets will be effective as of the 1st of January 2025. And I guess we have maybe some nervous retailers and producers by now because of the lack of the system. So there's one central organization that has, well, that were the first to report themselves to the ministry, Stichting UPV in Dutch. And they are, as we speak, also wanting to have a collectively binding agreement for the entire industry. However, there are also two other PROs that have entered the field, and one of them is also present in our panel today. It's Janine from Collectief Textiel. Nou goed, Europe? No. Circulair Collectief Textiel, I have to say it correctly. And also from the Landbouw Group, the European Recycling Platform. The last one has also managed to attract some rather large retailers that are active throughout Europe. And Landbouw also has the idea to be a European PRO for textiles. So there's a lot of turmoil, I should say, because well, we are of course one of the stakeholders, together with the social enterprises, the thrift shop organizations, and the waste management organizations and the municipalities. And we are done representing the collectors, sorters, and recyclers. And actually, the other stakeholders are very much in favor of having a collectively binding agreement. And we are at the moment the only association that has voted against that, because we rather see a system where we have multiple PROs active, because we do not believe in a one central PRO in monopolistic situation, basically, where one PRO has all the budget, all the power, and also we're going to talk about inclusive governance later. But in the case of this PRO, the board has already been formatted, and it is not inclusive, definitely not. So there's still a lot of discussion around that, also around the reimbursements that should go to collecting, sorting, and recycling of textiles, and also towards the monitoring. Again, the system as such, the legislation is there, the system is not there. And it will be very exciting to see what is going to happen as of January. It will be a very interesting situation in the Netherlands for sure. So yeah, that's a quick update from the little country by the North Sea.
Yeah, could I also ask you on that? Because you mentioned about the governance aspect of it. So how do we balance inclusive governance with the need for rapid EPR setup, and also what support is needed there, perhaps?
Yeah, that I gave you a good bridge there, but I think I need to point out first that EPR is not a silver bullet, and as much as we do need EPR, an EPR framework on European level, and the individual EPR systems in the member states, we also really need supporting legislation, because just to give you a very practical example, as Matthias also mentioned, recycling is the only step in the processing chain of discarded textiles that is not working and that is costing money. And this is also, from my opinion, where the majority of the EPR funds should go to. That's great. So then recycling gets the money to build up capacity, to innovate, to improve recycling techniques. That's all wonderful. Then we have a great recycled content or a recycled textile fiber that comes out of that process, but we have no one who wants to buy it. And that is a huge problem. I mean, we are pushing a market that is not there. And that's why, in my opinion, and then I come back to the governance also, collaboration is at the core of every EPR system. I mean, we are all different industries being put together in the end. And the first thing we have to do is we have to look at each other's interests, at each other's needs, and begin to understand that and appreciate that, and really have a genuine willingness to work together. And my experience from talking also to the producer organizations is that that willingness, that genuine willingness to collaborate, is not there yet with the producers. At the moment, I think they see EPR as an administrative burden, as a potential financial burden. And this financial burden they want to keep as low as possible. So in terms of inclusive governance, I think as we're sitting here around this table, we all agree. But if we would have someone from a PRO at this panel as well, we might get a different opinion, because it's very much saying, okay, principle, the polluter pays, but also the one who pays decides. We found it very hard to in the Netherlands to have an inclusive governance. We are talking about a sort of, patchwork solution, let's put it that way. But the fact of the matter is that the board of this Stichting UPV has already been formatted. And this is also one of the reasons why the VHT has said, or why our association has said, no, I mean, we're not going to surrender ourselves to one PRO. We want to see what possibilities there are in a collaboration in a multiple PRO system, to see if we can achieve this collaboration, because EPR is about circularity, and circularity is about working together. So this is these are things that we really find are essential. So yes, coming back then to supporting legislation, mandatory use of recycled post-consumer textile content. I cannot stress post-consumer enough. But also, an end of waste discussion. We do not have an official end of waste for textiles going for reuse or going for recycling. This also prohibits, for instance, investors from stepping into the recycling industry. So why should they invest in a recycling facility if they're not sure if they can actually export the output as a raw material in a manufacturing process? And those manufacturing processes don't take place in Europe. So these are all a lot of different elements that are all pieces of the puzzle that need to be fit together in a good way. I really liked what Rasmus said in the very beginning, preferably yesterday. But because that's also the urgency of today, that we really have an industry that is a bit on the verge of collapse, without wanting to sound too dramatic. But it's it's 5 to 12, as they say in the Netherlands. So we need to get a move on.
Yeah, great, Mariska. I think that was a really interesting take, and a lot can be learned from the Dutch context, certainly. I think I see that Viana is now here. So maybe, Viana, I might just repeat the question for you, but I'm just wondering if, kind of given municipality and your experience in it, if you could, like, how do you foresee the future responsibility of municipalities in the separate collection of textiles, and also their collaboration with the EPR schemes?
Sorry about the connection problems. I'm traveling at the moment, but can you hear me properly?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to start with my name and a small introduction of Municipal Waste Europe first. So I am Vanya Veres. Excuse me. I am Secretary General of an organization called Municipal Waste Europe. This is a European umbrella organization of national public waste management companies which belong to municipalities. So it is the municipal level, and the obligation of municipalities to deliver on waste collection, separate collection obligations, following the Waste Framework Directive and all of the daughter directives. I'll jump straight into the governance question that you asked. Now, if we look at Articles 8 and 8A of the Waste Framework Directive, they already have an obligation for member states to set up an independent body. Let's say it could be like an umbrella at national level, bringing together all relevant parties in the value chain of whichever particular waste stream has extended producer responsibility, in order to design together, on the basis of the EPR designate for that waste stream. In this particular case, textiles EPR is within the Waste Framework Directive. That's not the case for packaging, for example, or we. And this umbrella group, let's say umbrella organization, national, independent, would bring together in textiles, it would bring together the obligated parties, that is the producers. And this is before producer responsibilities organizations are created. It's the basis behind it, underpinning it. Municipalities, because of their obligation to separately collect. Social enterprises and their organizations, because it is also their obligation to collect, because they are already established on the market. Reuse operators, if they are different from the social enterprises. Recycling organizations, because they also need to explain their role and what their needs are within the framework, and sorting plants, of course, which come before the recycling step. If that it's because this obligation came after those EPR systems had been set up. The obligation only came in 2018. But where it has been created, and in Austria it has been created, there is a much more collaborative approach, effective in implementation, towards setting up PROs. Whether there is only one producer responsibility organization for that waste stream in that member state, or whether there's more than one. Now, as far as municipalities are concerned, in aiming for transparency, because transparency is one of the most important aspects of making sure that an extended producer responsibility system works. And that's transparency in quantities that hit the market, in quantities of waste, in quantities of waste collected. If you have multiple PROs, if there isn't a practical reason, for example, you have a very different collection system for the different parts of that waste stream, then the competition is set at the wrong level if you have multiple PROs. The competition, if you have multiple PROs, is set at the fees, the membership fees. A PRO is like a membership organization. And the PRO will set their calculation method for their fees unless they are imposed a calculation method from the EPR design at national level. The European level cannot design the details of the EPR system. That is subject to subsidiarity. So for textiles, when we're talking about apparel, shoes, so clothing, accessories, and shoes, just to be complete, these are all collected in the same bin, or they are intended to be collected in the same bin. So that means one PRO is possible. And then competition is set at another level. So it's the efficiency of the system which allows you to make sufficient profit on your reusable items to be able to pay for the system, to be able to pay for the social enterprises, for the sorting. The same way as the efficiency will make or improve the profitability of the recycling step. Now, within the EPR, which will go through the PRO but have to national level, the details of it, we have related fees. Like Matthias, the differential between the 60% of cost coverage which comes from reuse in country. We focus also on maximum reusability within the country. So the part of the textile waste that municipalities will be collecting is additional to what is already being collected by social enterprises. This would be the optimal outcome. Today, if social enterprises in a particular country are collecting 30, 40, 50% of total textile waste in the definition of the Waste Framework Directive, then it is municipalities' obligation to collect the other 50% and make sure that there are no textiles in an ideal world in the mixed waste stream. So that is the way the two collaborate. From there...
Yeah, sorry, can I just jump in here, Vanya? Because I think you're mentioning something that is very relevant for everyone, the practical aspect of the collection of textile.
Yeah.
And I would like to have a follow-up question on that a little bit. So how can we bridge the gap between this separate collection and implementing the textile EPR? Because I see that there's a gap between there, kind of, you're talking about.
Well, the textile EPR is supposed to come first, and it's not going to, because the Commission was late with the revision of the Waste Framework Directive and the creation of this textile EPR. So we have a time gap there. I can come to that later because we have been dealing with that, both with EURIC and with reuse. And there are precedents which should cover that time gap. So deontologically, EPR is supposed to come first because it's the framework. EPR has to pay for separate collection, sorting, transport between one and the other, and recycling, and also ultimate waste treatment. for anything that is not recyclable. That is extended producer responsibility. Under Articles 8 and 8A, which pre-exist the Textiles EPR, the producer is obliged to pay a minimum of 80% of those costs. So that obligation already exists. And when member states implement the EPR, they are obliged to combine what is already in Articles 8 and 8A and what is in the Textiles EPR. Because all three, or let's say 6 articles are relevant. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much, Fiona. And I really appreciate your intervention. I think that was really insightful. I'm just going to move on to Janine now. And I'm wondering, Janine, if you can potentially touch on why did the Fair Resource Foundation, as an environmental organisation, decide to launch a PRO, and then how does it differ from traditional PROs?
Yes, thanks a lot. So Janine Reuling from Collective Circular Textiles in English. So as Alba already mentioned, the environmental NGO Fair Resource Foundation started CCT, Collective Circular Textiles. And the reason why we did that was actually we've done research into specifically the governance of EPR schemes, looking broadly at why is it that we see a lot of these EPR schemes for various product streams, because we don't have a lot of examples for EPR for textiles. Why is it that in terms of environmental effectiveness, they seem to not really move or foster the making product streams more environmentally friendly, even though it is environmental legislation. And we specifically looked at the way that these EPR schemes were set up, the way that they were governed. And what we see is that with what we call traditional EPR schemes, the prime focus is on cost effectiveness. So I think Mariska also touched upon it. The boards of traditional PROs consist of producers. A lot of the times these are the bigger producers, not necessarily very environmentally friendly, very small producers, but the bigger producers in the country normally take place in the board of these PROs. From that, we see that the system is oftentimes put on the market. So instead of looking at what is needed in the market and what already exists, we see that these producers together decide on a specific EPR scheme that is then put on the market. And we really think, and that's also the reason why we started with CCT, that it is in order to make a product stream more environmentally friendly, or to really have this environmental impact that EPR can have potentially, to set up a scheme and a PRO that works together with the different stakeholders in the market and also really includes them into the decision-making processes. And as Mariska mentioned, we have EPR for textiles. Officially, it started in July 2023. So this first year, so 2024, there's only a reporting obligation for producers. And then starting in 2025, the targets need to be met. And we don't have collection targets, but we have preparation for reuse targets, we have recycling targets, and we have fiber-to-fiber recycling targets with the lack of the recycled content targets. So there's the big gap, as Mariska already explained. And what we did, we were, as an environmental NGO, we were involved in the sort of legislative process of drafting the legislation from the side, not really involved in the process, unfortunately. And at first, we were hoping that maybe the traditional PRO that was going to be set up would actually embrace all the good initiatives that we already have in terms of the circular textiles, let's say. So those can both be producers, but it can also be in terms of recycling. And but as time passed, we saw that the way that the PRO was structured and also the way that they dealt with the interests of the other stakeholders in the country, that it was very much traditional. So the mere focus was on setting up a system that is very cheap for the producers, setting up a system where power is concentrated within the organization and not necessarily looking at how can we have this inclusive governance? And that's the point where we decided that it was needed and there was a momentum to set up an alternative PRO. So Collective Circular Textiles is, as far as we're concerned, the only impact-driven PRO for textiles. Also the first one, as far as we know, that is being set up by an environmental NGO. So there's not really an example of how you should go about this. But we see that there is really a need in the market for this inclusive governance structure. So the goal is, we started relatively late, and that's also why we start small and build from there, and it's going very well. But the goal is to have the various stakeholders that are needed to together make what we call the circular ecosystem work. So that could be sorters, collectors, recyclers, but also knowledge institutions, the social enterprises, NGOs, to really come together and together identify what is going well, what is not going well, how can we meet the targets, but also do the targets actually meet the reality that we see in practice. So one of the first things that we found out is, for example, the textiles legislation that we have sort of approaches textiles as this uniform group. So we have consumer textiles, we have some business textiles, but it doesn't really look at the way that, for example, B2B textiles, which are huge volumes, they are not necessarily fit for reuse. It is also has a very specific collection system that is not necessarily, has nothing to do, for example, with the municipal collection system that most countries have. So as Collective Circular Textiles, we also decided to set up a separate textile collection or textile management system for B2B. So these could, for example, be hotel linen or workwear, where it's really the textiles are concentrated at one specific point, or there's rental contracts that that manage these textiles. And then we also have a lot of more sustainable producers that also need their specificities, but that's more in terms of advocacy, because as was also mentioned before, the way that the legislation is set up at the moment is still in terms of kilos. But it is very unfair, and that's also what we hear from our participants, that they, for example, produce a fully woolen sweater, which is way heavier. It lasts maybe 3 generations, but then in terms of the fee that they have to pay, they pay a lot of money compared to a producer that maybe produces a lot of polyester t-shirts. So there's a lot of information that needs to go from actually practice towards the policymakers, but also to really see how the inclusive governance, because we don't have a lot of examples, how the inclusive governance can be implemented into legislation as well. Because what we want to create is also a blueprint, given that we're going to have all these different PROs for textiles in the various member states, to create a blueprint where we can say this does work, it works in practice. It is maybe more difficult to make decisions altogether if you're not a uniform group, but it is actually what is necessary in order to create this ecosystem where we can really say that we are working on making the textiles industry more sustainable. And having sort of EPR as one piece of the puzzle, as Mariska said, not a silver bullet. We also need to have other legislation in place. For example, recycled content would be great to foster the change, but this is an important first step.
Yeah, I think you mentioned also the stakeholder involvement and the full stakeholder involvement, let's say that. However, some policymakers see inclusive governance as a potential conflict of interest. How would you respond to this?
I think it's a very interesting question, because if we would turn it around, you could also say that a board that only exists of producers that then decide on the fees for the producers could also be seen as a conflict of interest. So I think it's maybe an easy argument to say, let's not do it, because then everybody will sort of vouch for their own interest. But in the end, a circular economy will never work if you're not approaching it together, if you're not really working together. So inclusive governance for me, and also for us as an organization, it's not really a question of should we do it, should we not do it, is it maybe too difficult? It's something that is so clear for us that it's just necessary in order to make the transition towards more circularity within textiles possible. Of course, it's going to be more difficult. It's easier if you put like 5 big producers together and then say, okay, let's just set up a system that's cheap and we don't need to incorporate the point of view of, for example, municipalities or the social enterprises. But in the end, you will not have a system that works towards this sustainable goal. So for us, it's not a question of, is it a conflict of interest? I think you need to have good guidelines on how decisions are being made. I think you need to have transparency. What happens with the money? How are decisions being made? You need to be transparent towards your participants. You need to be transparent towards other stakeholders. But the inclusive governance is not something that we can either choose to do or not do. I think it's a necessity.
Yeah, thank you. I think Vanya wanted to make a point about something. Could you please?
Yes, please. So inclusive governance is important, but it's also incredibly important that you get it at the right level. Having all the actors in the producer responsibility organization itself is the wrong level. We've seen things go spectacularly wrong when waste management companies in Germany, for example, were responsible for, or got a license as a PRO for packaging. Zero transparency. There was no reuse recycling done, in effect. And the data that was communicated on that was also false. I think that it's much more important to make sure that all parties are present in the design phase of the EPR, the design phase of the calculation method for the price, the cost of collection, and how much of that cost of collection is to be reimbursed to whoever does the collection, whether it is the municipality who's responsible or the social enterprises. There can be private waste management companies who do the collection as well. But as in most member states, it will be a municipal obligation. It will still be the municipality who has the responsibility of the contract, even if they contract that out. So that's basically where we stand as municipalities on the inclusive governments. Yes, at national level, in the EPR body, no at the PRO. Also, to be very careful with producer responsibility organizations, they must be non-profit, not for profit. If they are for profit, then we get the multiplication of PROs as we have with the packaging stream. Not just multiplication, but also aggressive takeovers in different member states of parts of the market or existing other PROs. I just wanted to make a point on the fees. Your example, Janine, of the wool and the weight of wool, I think, Janine, you made the point. It was a very good one. Because the purpose of modulated fees, again, to be designed in the EPR body, but there will be upcoming legislation in the next 5 or so years from the EU, which discusses that as well, but it will be too late. So the modulated fees are intended to make polycotton, mixed fibers, mostly synthetic and natural material mixes, which are not recyclable or very expensive to recycle, they are intended to make them much more expensive, and therefore to discourage the production and marketing of those types of textiles on the European market. It is also those types of textiles which cost the most because they end up having to be treated either in incineration or landfill. It is also those types of textiles which are illegally shipped. So the more control we have over the EPR system, over the PROs, the more transparency we have in collection and sorting, the more we will be able to contain our European textile wastes in Europe. The volumes are huge, but we have a responsibility to do that.
Great, thank you, Vianna, for that. I think it really adds another layer of kind of interest and explanation. I might just move on to our final panelists now before we open up the floor to questions, because I see there's a lot of engagement from the audience, and a lot of interesting questions coming into the chat. So I might move to Andreas. And I guess my first question for you is kind of bringing it back to, I guess, the municipality level, but really looking at SMEs and thinking about like how can SMEs benefit from this approach of inclusive governance in these EPR schemes?
Thank you, Alba. First of all, in Rasmus' opening speech, he had a bit of a gloomy vision on the fashion industry and the textile sector. I'm wearing a Danish garment here from a sustainable Danish family business, and that's also our approach to look at what's possible and how can we scale this up to the around 25 million SMEs in general, and to the textile sector in specifically. The textile sector has actually 99.7% of SMEs, and of those, more than 93% are micro enterprises, so having less than 10 employees. And those SMEs contribute to around 75% of employment and 2/3 of added value in the sector. We can say from a neutral perspective is that the polluter pays principle and the producer responsibility principle we think is an effective means of incentivizing sustainable product design and ensuring transparency and efficiency in waste management. In many exchanges, I often encounter the idea that SME organizations are in favor of exemptions. Want to make this very clear here. We're not in favor of an exemption of SMEs or micro enterprises from extended producer responsibility schemes. To the contrary, we think that they should be included, and we think that proper and inclusive implementation of EPR schemes can actually provide SMEs and micro enterprises with significant benefits. Which benefits am I talking about? We think that such an inclusive implementation will guarantee better access to crucial infrastructure to properly treat textile waste. As you can imagine, SMEs often lack the resources to handle waste management on their own. And through an inclusive government, SMEs can benefit from shared recycling infrastructure or joint logistics, thereby reducing the cost and technical barriers typically associated with waste treatment. Actually, SMEs can lower costs for waste management, benefiting from a proportionate implementation of EPR schemes, where each actor along the value chain is equally responsibility for their own part. SMEs can increase their sustainability profiles, which is increasingly important to consumers, but also when it comes to access to sustainable finance as in incentives. And thereby maybe creating a competitive advantage. Then there is the issue of the better access to data, since the implementation of EPR brings activities of data sharing and reporting systems. And SMEs can use those tools to demonstrate transparency to stakeholders, and at the same time have access to useful data that is otherwise very difficult to get. And of course, if there is a better access to training opportunities or technical assistance, which is a very crucial aspect to make SMEs business more circular and assist them in doing that, they could support it in the correct implementation of EPR schemes. And if I can add one thing on the question of the boards that was mentioned. This reminds me a lot of SMEs' involvement in standardization processes, actually, where we also have to fight for the involvement of SMEs in that, because otherwise our voices are often overheard, which, when I come back to the figures that I mentioned at the beginning, would be a huge mistake.
Yes, I think I would like you to expand a little bit on the SMEs and what role will SMEs play in the implementation of textile EPR?
Thank you for that question, Rikas. As key actors in the textile and fashion value chains, SMEs are often at the forefront of production, distribution, and innovation in the sector. They mostly operate at the beginning of the value chain, for example, as suppliers of finished products, or when it comes to yarns and fabrics. The definition of what constitutes a product and a producer must reflect those different value chain actors and the moment on which the burden of applying the environmental contribution falls, and that is favoring the logic of the subject that affixes its name or trademark on the product. We do need a correct application of the polluter pays principle to ensure that each environmental contribution paid by economic actors in the supply chain is proportionate to their actual role in the chain. See, more on practical terms, top down, if you will, SMEs would be asked to provide other actors on the value chain several information on how they manage textile waste, and thereby providing transparency. You can also look at it from another angle. When textile waste are correctly sorted and treated, SMEs can support the recovery and reuse of these waste, creating a second-hand market. These markets could include products made from recycled fibers, remanufactured garments, or even textile-based products such as insulation, construction materials, or accessories. That would give SMEs a more active role in boosting textile circularity. So we see an active role in there, and what we are trying to achieve is to ensure that the inclusive process puts SMEs to the importance that they have in the textile sector, and creates the right incentives and support measures for them to be an important actor and to carry the burden that they're supposed to carry.
That's great. Thank you so much, Andreas. I think we might move on to the Q&A now, because we have quite a few questions coming in. And first, I'd like to address a question to you, Rasmus, and a question that was asked in the chat by Jens. So the question is, today's discussion is very much spinning around the Waste Framework Directive and its restrictions, specifically Article 8, etc. The Waste Framework Directive is under revision, and the legislators need to look at how EPRs can be transformed in order to solve the big issue. EPR was originally developed as an environmental policy instrument, but it has been developed into a system just for financing collection of waste and no measures for volume reduction. Now we need to look beyond this. Can you carry this further?
I can promise to do my best. If it's possible to carry through or not, I think it's unsure. But I think specifically in the position we have from the Parliament, where we look both the weight and quantity as well. I mean, it is a new way of approaching it compared to other EPR systems that's been put in place before. So I think that's really one of the key demands from the Parliament in these negotiations, and something I would really concentrate on also in order to keep our rapporteur on the track when it comes to this, because it is a special business, and we all know the cases of textile. I mean, it is the fast fashion that is the biggest problem, and the quantity of consumption there is. I mean, we can talk about. I was just being commented on my gloomy prospect on the fashion industry. I'm sorry, when we look at the numbers, it's not gloomy. It's actually reality. I mean, look at the circular gap reports. I mean, it is ridiculously how little we have managed until now, compared to this as a business. And I mean, I came out of college back in '98, everybody was talking about sustainability, and we were talking about circularity. And the circularity we see today is basically downcycled plastic bottles we put into textile, and not actual fiber to fiber reuse. So it is a gloomy business we're looking at, and specifically for that, I mean, the EPR, we need to put in place legislation around it, has to focus both on weight and quantity, and put it at a right level that can actually then reduce the quantity there is, because that is the overall need we have right now. I mean, it is a whole business that needs to change, and I know the business models we need to see in the future is so different from what we see today, especially SMEs are actually at the forefront here. It's not, I mean, the biggest players are also the one with the biggest problem right now, because we see a lot of MEs and micro businesses actually working on business model. It's much more circular. But if we don't get the big players on board, and you all know the names of them, I mean, we're not going to do anything specially about this thing. So weight and quantity is key here when it comes to the EPR.
Yes, thank you, Rasmus. And I see that Matthias would like to comment on that as well.
Yes, thank you. I would like to add a little bit. I think it is a big illusion to think that EPR would reduce overproduction and overconsumption. And there are other instruments intended to do so, namely the Eco-Design Directive. But I doubt that even that will work, because on the other hand, we see a very huge political demand for deregulation, for reducing bureaucracy, reducing bureaucratic burden and administrative burden, making the public administrations more smaller and more and cheaper. So if you want to regulate the market and make market interventions to reduce production and consumption, then you need also the power of the state to control that. And for that you need staff, and staff costs money. And if we don't have the tax money to finance the execution of these laws, then we will not see the reduction of overproduction, overconsumption. So EPR is just an instrument to maybe bring a little bit more transparency and a little bit more justice in something that is happening, but should actually not happen. So that is, and that is also the modular fee topic is maybe a little bit of an instrument to shift production from short living products to longer living products. But if that modular fees are not designed in the right way, and if they are also part of a competition of EPR schemes among each other, or PROs among each other, then the idea of the modular fee is that the one with a long-lasting and best recyclable, best reusable product pays the lowest fee, and the ultra-fast fashion pays the highest fee. And then those EPR schemes that offer the cheapest high fee for the ultra-fast fashion, the ultra-fast fashion producer will always all go to these schemes, and the long-lasting product producers will be the rest, and then the competition will destroy the whole steering power of this instrument. So actually the modular fee should be on top of the cost coverage of the fees, and should cover, research and development, reuse prevention activities, awareness building, all these kind of things which are out of the EPR coverage, cost coverage. And these fees should be out of the competition and set by the states and or EU-wide and add it to the fees on top.
Great, thank you so much. I might come to Janine next, and because your hand's up, and then Viana, if you want to kind of add following here.
Yeah, just wanted to quickly add also to hopefully make Rasmus's life a little bit more easy, given that we're here together. I think that maybe a call to anybody who has direct access to their national policymakers to also make sure that the council would actually support the call for fees that also look at quantities. Because if we have both the council and the parliament asking for this specific provision within the Waste Framework Directive, then there's a chance that it might pass. And I think, Matthias, what you say makes sense. If I'm being a little bit more positive, I do hope that there is still room within the instrument of EPR to make it more effective. It's not a silver bullet. It won't stop overproduction all at once, but I do think we really need to look at the room that we still have to make the instrument more effective and make sure that, for example, we represent a lot of small sustainable textile producers, to make sure that they also get a stage and to have their say within EPR, and to make sure that their initiatives are rewarded within an EPR scheme, instead of having them carry the same burden as the big producers.
Thank you. Viana?
Hi. So I just wanted to agree both with what Janine said and with what Matthias said. So the modular fees should be additional. Then just to clarify, if the Parliament is looking to negotiate in trialogue on the method used to implement EPR, meaning the EPR fees would be based on a combination of weight, volume, or number of items sold, and on a very precise application of the modulated fee, then this is the way that we would suggest it being done. The most expensive, just to repeat what Matthias said, being the non-recyclable materials, which are the cheapest to produce. They cause social issues where they are produced, they cause environmental issues where they are produced, and then they cause environmental and social issues here in Europe as well. Now, there are some other tools that can be used, and they are being used on some other product groups in the EU, and that is to restrict market access to high volume, low quality online sales portals and companies into the EU. We're looking at something similar with a very hazardous waste for us, which is causing explosions in all manner of collection vehicles, sorting plants, incineration plants, and that is these laughing gas canisters, which are used for recreational activities. So we're looking to market restrictions for those to prevent accidents and these terrible costs. So we would suggest something similar happening with the high volume, low quality textiles. Otherwise, I have to agree that our experience to date is that EPR has not been successful in prevention. Let's open the window. Yeah, so modulated fees were brought in order to bring in the prevention aspect more effectively. Again, it hasn't been implemented so far correctly. So modulating how the modulated fees would be applied is something that we need to do. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mariska, I see your hand is up, so I'll move to you, but I also have a question for you as well. So I'll just ask you the question, then maybe you can address the 2 points.
No, that's fine.
Great.
Well, actually, Vanya took the stage before me, and she took actually what I wanted to say. So I'm going to echo her. So I'll be short about that. I think indeed that modulation of fees is as a tool, but like with any law, I mean, any law is just as effective as its enforcement, and that's really a concern for me as well, because we have all these wonderful tools, but how are they going to be consequently enforced? And does it not make more sense when we look at the very high value volumes of low quality textiles, but especially, I mean, we're talking about the last 5 years, and they have really affected our industry in a very, very bad way, because if you are collecting and sorting very low quality textiles that are not fit to be used even once, let alone for reuse, then how are you going to make a quality product out of that sorting? And that is really affecting us also in selling the secondhand products again. So from my opinion, also something needs to be done. But this is, of course, not on a European, but more on a member state level, to restrict the access and to maybe have higher import taxes for these products. I know France launched a pilot for that. It didn't fly, unfortunately, but I think it's something that collectively maybe some member states should look at, to see if a system like that would be possible, because I really think it's quite essential. Yeah, and you had a question.
Great.
So.
Yeah, thank you. No, so this is from Claire Kant in the chat, and it's, do you see that reuse, including preparation for use, will be part of the EPR fee dissemination pie? Today, majority of the circular business models are not financially viable as they compete with ultra and fast fashion. Big amounts of clothes are not reused and prepared for reuse, including repair, as this makes economically no sense to do that while you can buy new for very little money.
Yeah.
EPR is one of the most important measures to address this.
Okay, so if we were having this conversation about, say, a year to a year and a half ago, I would say, we'd rather not be dependent on EPR fees for collecting and sorting for reuse, and consequently reusing or selling secondhand, because that was, at that point in time, very much a self-functioning, self-financing system. The world has changed. So and definitely the effect of we're battling the fast fashion, not only on the front, as I was explaining earlier, but also on the sales side, offering secondhand, where consumers worldwide actually have a choice between buying a quality, I dare say, secondhand products from Western Europe and a new product for half the price. And this is something that made us now as an industry in Europe, it got us in trouble and made us financially dependent. So if you ask me now, then I say yes, we do need EPR funding for collection and for sorting as well, whereas before that would have been only applicable to recycling, as said, recycling was the only step in the processing chain of discarded textiles that actually needed to be financed. But that has changed, and it's my hope that the market will somehow recover. As I mentioned before, I think other tools, other measurements are much needed to fight that battle, because in the end, I think the survival of our industry really much depends on that. So yes, we can do EPR fees, but it will only be a temporary solution. It will not solve the structural problems in the market for reuse that we are facing now. I don't know if that answers the question completely, but.
Yes, thank you. So I think I would like to address the whole panel right now, and whoever would like to take this question, because I think this is something that everybody talked about from sources. So regarding the unprecedented crisis that the textile value chain is facing, what are the urgent measures to be implemented before the implementation of EPR schemes in the EU?
I would love it if someone had a good answer to that question. I'm ready to write it down.
Well, we've already discussed that,
Yes,
haven't we? If I can take this, we discussed it with EURIC, we discussed it with reuse, and there are 2 papers that have been circulated to the Commission. We consider that it would be an absolute, I will use the word catastrophe, if we allow the existing systems for separate collection and treatment of textiles, which have existed for years, to collapse between now and the implementation of EPR. So we consider that the Commission is very well placed with its EU Invest and various other funding tools to create an emergency fund to cover the period between now and implementation and effective implementation of EPR in all of the member states. So for us as municipalities, we would like to see an end date to that emergency fund, which is when it is replaced by the EPR scheme that's functioning in the particular member state. We know from experience that the northern western member states are much more, they're faster, they're more effective at implementing these aspects of legislation. The southern, central and eastern member states much slower. So there would have to be something which accelerates that process for them as well. But it is actually a practical move and something which the Commission does in other sectors. The example that I'll give now is that of the chemical fertilizers production companies, the production sector, which received huge subsidies when they were struggling economically because their raw material supply was no longer available when the Ukraine war started. And I have to say that that was, I would say, not particularly well managed by the EU side, because they managed to give such high subsidies that those companies made record profits in those years when they were getting the subsidies. So that's not the intention of this. The intention is to keep the sector afloat and to provide for investment in more capacity for sorting plants, for sorting, and also to help with investments in recycling between now and when EPR starts, because the current drafting of the Waste Framework Directive stipulates that EPR will not cover historical waste, even counting from the date of obligatory implementation of separate collection. So separate collection is obligatory on the 1st of January. EPR will most likely not be in place in the majority of member states for a minimum of 5 years later, so 2030. Anything invested in between 2025 and 2030 will not be covered by EPR. So the emergency fund needs to do that. It's not the fault of any part of the industry or the sector that EPR will be late. So yeah, we're pretty strong on that. That's our suggestion.
Okay, Mariska, because I see your hand was up first,
Yeah.
would you like to comment?
Yeah, so just a short reaction on what Vanya said. Thank you. I've noted it down. So create an emergency fund to bridge the time between our crisis now and the implementation and effectiveness of EPR schemes. That's great. My concern would also be that it does not have a strong impact on the market as such, that we create sort of zombie companies. So I mean, to assess what kind of funding would be needed, we would have to have some robust data, at least, about the cost and revenues of the current system. I can also tell you from my experience in the Netherlands that is very much lacking in this industry, so that might create a problem. But I do believe that something needs to be done, because it would be an eternal waste if the current existing infrastructure where textiles are for over 1,000 years, I learned today, already collected and sorted and recently recycled for it to go to waste. I mean, to stay in the same terminology. So something needs to be done, and I think if it would be possible to financially aid those companies that make an impactful contribution to a circular textile chain by their activities, that would be very helpful. Of course, we would have to have a realistic idea about what those activities are costing. And we assume that they at the moment have little to no revenue, but we need to have some idea about that, and we need to also become concrete quite fast. But that is a way to go, and I hope we can find a solution in the near future in that area.
Yes, and I see that Matthias also wanted to comment on that.
Yes, I absolutely support everything that Vanya and Mariska said. And Reuse issued an open letter on this topic, which is now on the website of our organization, which we will distribute to European policymakers, more or less with the same content, with of course special focus on social economy, on local reuse. But what I would like to add is that it would help a lot. I do not know if it is realistic, but it would help a lot if the European Union would take out pressure from that market by postponing the mandatory textile collection starting from January 1st next year, because that will produce even more collected material, which is then even more difficult to place on the market and will more or less be incinerated. And already now, collected textiles, which were originally designed for reuse overseas, are incinerated now in Austria and other countries. I know some cases. And as soon as that will be publicly known by media, by the public, then that will completely destroy the future motivation of people to donate their textiles. So it is absolutely overdue that all these measures be taken to finance the sector, but also to postpone this separate collection, mandatory separate collection from January 1st. Thank you.
All right, and maybe we could go to Andreas before jump into the next question.
Thank you. This transition period of a new parliament and a new commission brings out a bit of suspense in pending files. So I hope that the first urgent thing is to finalize this revision and make sure that micro enterprises are being included in EPR schemes. I can't repeat that too often because many people might have got the impression from other stakeholders that the opposite should be the case. Matthias, I think you mentioned the importance of the eco-design regulation as well. Maybe that's also, again, valuable to stress that this is a very important piece of legislation for the textile sector and for textile producers. That it's really important to get the coherence between sustainable textiles legislation right, because somebody warned of the new trend of asking for deregulation. In the commissioner hearings, I think many commissioners said simplification doesn't mean deregulation. It means workability for SMEs. It means coherence between policy tools and also making use of some interesting elements maybe for several legislation. And I think in the chat someone mentioned the digital product passport and traceability of information. I think this is important when it comes to data in the supply chain and making best use of it, and making sure that those instruments do not become just ever more reporting and data collection, but making best use of all that available. So coherence here really is key from our perspective, and also the planning stability to know where we're heading.
Great, thank you so much everyone for that. So next question for me is a follow-on question that was posted in the chat on the collapse of sorting infrastructure in Europe. So I'll just open this to the floor, and whoever wants to take it, please jump in. So if we put the money in the recycling technologies, is this not creating a new dynamic in the market? Circulating the materials to the recycling companies, paying them to sort, paying the sorting companies the amount of money they need for the feedstock. Not sure if anyone wants to tackle
I can say something about that. That would help for sure. But I do want to again stress the point that also recycling companies need a market, they need an offtake. So it's great if we help them, upskill also to industrial level, which will make their process much more cost effective. So that there, I think that could play a role. And whoever made the comment is right. I mean, it also means that for sorting companies who now have to sell their non-reusable items to recycling companies at a negative price, they will get most likely then a more positive price, which makes their whole financing system better in balance, especially given the fact that the revenues from the reusable items and textiles have really decreased. So that would be a way forward. Again, we don't want to create any artificially maintained companies. You do want in the end that there's an economically viable business model under recycling, and we have to work on that. And therefore we need to create this offtake, and we need to have the producers incorporate the recycled textile content in their new garments and textile products. I hope the industry will still move on its own, and I know some companies do. I mean, some companies really do have the best intentions, and they also, like the sweater Andreas is wearing, really show that it's possible. But we need the big players to get off the fence and start putting in orders for recycled fibers or other recycled content that is replacing virgin.
Great, thank you so much. Rasmus, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. No, it was just a comment that we have to look into this as it's a new business we're creating. To think of this as the sorters we know by now, or even the reuse sales channels we have by now. I mean, this have to be scaled up to something unforeseen before. So I think it would be a huge mistake to think that it is the businesses we know today that is just going to scale up. There needs to come other people on the market as well if we are to succeed in actually recycling all this textile waste we are seeing right now. That's also a comment to the answer before from Matthias about that we need to postpone the collection now. I think it would be a big mistake because we know we need to get the volume up in order for it to be a valuable resource that can actually then be used in the recycling of fibers. And it's a big change to get people on board to actually begin to go to this special bin with the textile waste in order for it to come into the whole cycle. So it takes time as well to build up the volumes that need to be, and therefore I think it's important. I can see I come from a member state where we already have a collection of textile waste from household. It's been rolled out in all municipality now, and we could see first we had a huge increase in the volume, and then it stagnated because then it's going to be very difficult to get the last on board. It's the first movers, yes, they're easy to get on board, but in order to get the actual volume with the tons and tons of textiles we throw out, I mean, it will take time. It's a cultural change for citizens and consumers as well we're talking about. So no need to postpone anything at all. And then, yes, of course, there can be need of helping the sorting companies is already, but also to look into all the new ones that's going to come. I mean, to use more technology in sorting textile fibers. I mean, and I know of a startup where it's actually a robot can sort the different colors and fibers, so it's easier to reuse afterwards. We also need to think that it's not just the small volumes that we can't proceed with as we know it. It's something completely unseen that we have to scale up to now.
Thank you. And I think Fiona as well, you have a point to make.
Yes, so I'd just like to come back to the state of the current setup. I'll call it the sector or industry. There are already companies not only floundering, but that have closed their doors. These are sorting companies. We have debated as well in Municipal Waste Europe whether there should be a delay in implementation, but the problem there is that so many member states, even if they haven't started contemplating EPR for textiles, they have started rolling out the bins on the streets. They've started communicating to their citizens that they need to collect separately. So I think that we have to keep the ball rolling as it has started, but we do need to make sure that those companies that have recently closed their doors are given the funds to open the doors again, rehire the people who are expert at sorting, but make very sure that the money they are given is tied to the priority of sorting for reuse first. We also need to make sure that part of that fund goes towards new recycling technologies for pulling apart fibers and respinning natural fibers. So with a priority on natural fibers because they have a longer lifespan and a longer reusability and recyclability lifespan. And we have to make very sure, this is something that we've discussed as well right from the beginning, but which the textile producers don't agree with. And that is to have a very high penalty for PET, for example, PET from packaging being used for textiles and being called recycling. It's not recycling. So if we can put in place that priority and make sure that this emergency fund comes online in months, not years, so that these companies can open again, these sorting plants, and that part of that fund goes towards supporting investments into new sorting plants, new sorting capacity in all member states. Without sorting capacity locally, we cannot prioritize local reuse. The volumes are too high. And by prioritizing sorting capacity locally, we also prioritize the social enterprises, the creation of jobs for the long-term unemployed. It's a whole circular economy. And there's another aspect to this too. Because apart from the emergency fund, all of these European funds, and this might be something which the Parliament in trialogue can bring in as an emergency addition to textiles EPR because of the difficulty that the sector is in. And that is to make sure that EU Invest, the Resource Recovery Fund, and any other such instrument which gives funds directly to public and private sector from the EU is tailored to fit the sector. That means that the quantity of funding available starts at 2 million, 5 million, and not 100 million, which it is today. Then it can be usable. 100 million is so far beyond the necessary funds to keep these companies afloat or even to invest in new sorting plants. Not used, stays on the shelf, or it goes to the wrong kind of investment. So that is far to making sure that this works and doesn't just stay on paper.
All right, thank you. I think we're also looking at this perspective. Well, this will probably be our last question for the panel, so whoever wants to jump in on it. But I think we mentioned a lot of key points of what the ground rules should be for all the enterprises and actors involved. But I would like to ask this question from Simon Stoyanov. And so how do the panelists view the exceptions and otherwise favorable conditions for social enterprises that are currently part of the Council changes to the WFD revision? Yes, Vanya, maybe you would like to go. Or was it Matthias? Yeah, with the hand.
Okay. Yeah, I think we hear from some sides. We sometimes hear that municipalities and social enterprises are mentioned too much in the Waste Framework Directive, and that they are more privileged, and there should be a level playing field and equal rights for all. The fact is that both municipalities and social enterprises do not make profit, and especially social enterprises are extremely vulnerable because they cannot even build up reserves. And so giving them a little bit more priority in that sector means to give them a level playing field with the private companies, which are for profit usually, and can build up reserves from their profits, and even they go broke, as we see now with the biggest sorting company that went bankrupt just a few weeks ago. And so I think what looks like an exception is actually not an exception. It is to give them equal the equal opportunities like others.
Yes, maybe somebody else would like to jump in on this.
I'm just going to agree with what Matthias said. I don't really have anything else to add there. It's very important that municipalities and social enterprises are equally mentioned, and especially mentioned in EPR for textiles, because both are active. Social enterprises have been for a very long time. Municipalities, it's new for them in the majority of member states, and they haven't been mentioned before. It hasn't been explicit that municipalities and social enterprises, all the actors in the value chain of the waste management, must be included in the design of the EPR. It has only been the obligated industry, as they call themselves, which are the producers, and producers will only design what minimum they can design to keep their costs at a minimum. So we have to be there as a balancer, and anything that is mentioned against that by the producer, in this case the textiles industry, it is simply demonstrating that they are only looking at cost and not at circularity.
Yes, Janine, you also wanted to jump in?
Yeah, just to add on, because I completely agree. I think we should also not forget, and for us, it's as I said, we are very much impact driven, and it's not only environmental impact but also social impact. Because specifically looking at social enterprises, they do employ a lot of people also with a distance to the labor market, and I think it's important to not only look at what is how can we set up the cheapest system and then ignore this huge group of people that actually have jobs through those social enterprises, but really to see how we can include them. And secondly, I think that specifically for the Netherlands, we can also really learn from existing EPR schemes for other product streams, where we see that specifically the position of municipalities is very, very complicated, because on the one hand, they do have the legal obligation for managing waste for their citizens, and at the same time we have the EPR scheme that sort of comes in. And if we look at packaging, we see now that there's very big conflicts already for years between the municipalities and the monopoly PRO, where the municipalities feel completely left out of decision-making processes. Some municipalities don't get their fees for years already. And I think that we really need to look at EPR in a new way and see how can we include them to ensure that this doesn't happen, for example, also with textiles.
Sorry, I have to come in here and just come back on that word monopoly that you used, because I don't want there to be a misunderstanding. So there is only one PRO for textiles in Belgium, and it operates extremely well because there is this collaboration between the producer. Let's put it in another way. The producer responsibility organization acts as a mediator between its members, who are the packaging producers, and the municipalities. They work directly together with our member for Flanders, for example. And it is our member from Flanders that drafts the contract, which is the basis of collaboration between the PRO and the municipalities. So this is an example of how it should work. You do have only one PRO for packaging in the Netherlands, but this collaboration is missing. It is entirely monopolized by who doesn't want to enter into constructive dialogue with the other party, which is the municipality who does the collection. And so that has gone very wrong for the 25 years that I've been in waste management. The first use of the word monopoly in EPR was the for-profit German DSD system. And the European Court of Justice broke that up for being a monopoly because it was not collaborating with municipalities at all. Municipalities were in a terribly difficult situation, from the tiniest ones to the largest ones. But the effect of that was simply to multiply the number of for-profit PROs in Germany from 1 to, I think it's 14 now, or 14 was the largest number. And then more legislation had to come along to make sure that municipalities could operate under one contract. So the PROs would have to deliver their service to the whole country and not piece by piece, either for the product-based or region-based. Mm-hmm. This is why we insist very much that PROs must be not for profit, and we prefer the facility, the simplicity, and the transparency of just one PRO per waste stream. If that can't be avoided, having multiple PROs, then at least they should be not for profit, and they need to be coordinated by an independent body at national level to make sure that, let's say, the largest PROs are not paying for the smaller PROs, or the smaller PROs are not paying for the larger PROs.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you, Fiona.
The money has to be balanced.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's an important note. Janine, I'll just let you speak very briefly, and then we're actually going to hand over to Yana for closing remarks, because I'm conscious that we've taken a lot of everyone's time this afternoon.
Yeah, just very shortly, I think it's also important that we really set a framework in which we decide what the minimum requirements. We obviously have minimum requirements within the Waste Framework Directive for PROs, but things like transparency and how a PRO should operate really need to be strengthened, because the whole discussion on for-profit or not for profit, I think we should definitely not have for-profit PROs. But at the same time, we also know from examples in the Netherlands that even with non-profit PROs, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a lot of money left in the system where nobody knows where the money is going towards. We have with the packaging PRO, there's millions. The estimation is like 250 million euros of DRS money that is somewhere. Nobody knows exactly where, and even if it's not even if it is a not-for-profit PRO, we still have a lot of difficulties when it comes to financial transparency. So I think that setting a better minimum requirements for PROs is a necessity for that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Janine. I'd like to hand over now to Jana, our co-organizer, one of our co-organizers, for closing remarks. Thank you so much to all our panelists. It's been great.
Thank you, Alba. So I won't keep you long anymore. I just want to thank everyone. First of all, Erikas and Alba for moderating the event, and also to all the speakers. We wanted to create enough space for discussion, so I think that was successful, and I'm really pleased with the types of the speakers we had. We had the pioneer PRO, we had, as Matthias explained, social enterprises active since maybe 1,000 years. We had the key actors like municipalities, SMEs, and of course the policymakers. So also thanks to all the participants, we had over 180 people here, still over 100 are on the call after 2 hours. So I think that's a good sign. And I also want to, for those who are not aware, I want to tell you a bit about the organizers. We are part of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And within this platform, there is a group on textiles. And this group is regularly organizing these online events. We have been active since 5 years, and the group is gathering civil society, the industry, research organizations, etc. And the aim is to bring the EU issues to European stakeholders, but also show you what we are actually working on. As you see, everybody here on the panel is very invested and very engaged. This is because discussions like this are our everyday bread and butter, and the EU policies are really shaping and influencing the organizations we represent. And we are trying to bring these discussions also further away from Brussels, where many of us are based, and really deep diving into the EU policies. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. The recording will be available on the website of the event, and we hope to see you or hear from you at another time. And thank you also for the very lively discussion in the chat and all your questions. We can respond to all of them, but hopefully we could provide some deep, at least some deep content that you can now take home and think about. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.